I've always been a fan of Tibalt. I remember when he came, tiny little guy, we all knew he was destined for great evil things. And look at him now, trying to take over the world, or actually I don't really know what he's trying to do. I haven't read the Kaldheim lore, but he's trying to do something with a sword and Yggdrasil. Or well, actually, this is Yggdrasil in Norse mythology. I don't know what the name of that tree is in the Kaldheim lore story, but that is supposed to be Yggdrasil. Regardless guys, welcome to a competitive commander card review for the new Rakdos Tibalt commander option. Or also we're gonna talk about having him inside the 99 as well. But let's begin actually explaining the card. This is a so-called modal double-faced card, which means you can choose which option, which phase you're playing. You can either play it for black and 1 generic, Valki, God of Lies, or for black, red and 5 generic, a total of 7 mana for the planeswalker Tibalt Cosmic Imposter. In the top left corner of both cards you see a symbol, a black triangle in the Valki card and 2 white triangles in the Tibalt Planeswalker card. The black triangle in the Valki card is indicating that this is the front or visual card of this card. This means that Valki, God of Lies, is the official phase this card is presenting, which means whenever it is in your hand, in the command zone in your deck, that it is a 2 mana cost, 2/1 black legendary god. That means that you can play it as a commander in the command zone, but you can also cast it as a planeswalker from the command zone as well. So for 7 mana you get a 5 loyalty planeswalker with, as Tibalt enters the battlefield you get an emblem with, you may play cards exiled with Tibalt Cosmic Imposter, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. That means that if you exile things with this planeswalker, you can cast them later even if the planeswalker actually leaves the battlefield. And his first +2 loyalty ability will exile a top card of all players' libraries, and with the emblem you can later cast them whenever you want to. Well, some of you might say 7 mana is a little bit too expensive for that little effect, and you might be a little bit right. However, I would like to point out that Paco and Haldan, Temur color identities at 8 mana that is doing the exact same thing, have already proven that that is quite worth the effort. 8 mana to exile 4 cards from all libraries that you can later cast is a really grindy engine in the Paco Temur deck, and for 7 mana to do the exact same thing, but this time around you can actually cast creature spells, and even if the planeswalker goes, you can still cast your things. If Haldan disappears, you can't actually cast anything you have stolen with Paco. Then again, in Paco Haldan's case, you first pay 5, then you pay 3, you pay them a little bit separately, while in Tibalt's case you have to reach the 7 in one go, and that is a little bit more tricky, and creatures are usually a little bit better. Planeswalkers, you kind of have to protect them with blockers and such. However, Tibalt got 7 loyalties at this point, so attacking and killing Tibalt might be a little bit tricky. And once you get your next turn after activating the +2 ability, you're probably gonna be casting a few creatures that you've exiled and stolen, so I think it's gonna be able to work out in longer, grindier game scenarios. Then we have -3 loyalty ability to exile a creature or artifact that you can also later cast. You can basically kind of remove and steal things there. And then -8 exile all graveyards and add 3 red mana to your mana pool. And with this you basically have a Yawgmoth's Will or the Mnemonic Betrayal forever. So we have a lot of different powerful abilities here at 7 mana. That is looking pretty interesting. However, it is 7 mana, and because of that, it is a bit janky. But this is where the card design of this is actually rather interesting and amazing. You see, you have an earlier version that you can cast before the 7 mana thing, which actually might lead it into a more expensive thing because the command attacks and such. But here it is Valki, God of Lies, a 2 mana cost legendary creature god at 2/1. When Valki enters the battlefield, each opponent reveal their hand. That is good, that is giving you some information what they're up to, if some of them are close to combo off and winning, or if they're just sitting there with interaction and got nothing better to do, or if they're up to some other strange gimmicky IDs. For each opponent, exile a creature card they reveal this way until Valki leaves the battlefield. So now we're also hand disrupting our opponents. We have to protect this creature, of course. If they remove it, they regain whatever we temporarily stole from them. Then we have an activated ability of X. Choose a creature card exiled with Valki with converted mana cost X. Valki becomes a copy of that card. So now we can gain some value here as well, gaining some juicy, interesting creature one of our opponents has and become a copy of that. If you want to play this as a cEDH Rakdos deck, I highly recommend that you're going for the Tibalt as your main gameplay commander option. Let's actually talk about the other scenario. Let's say that you're casting Valki, God of Lies. It's really hard to actually establish a form of solid game plan with Valki. You're gonna interact with your opponents, maybe copy some grind value, or you gain a Bird of Paradise, and that's it. And then suddenly you might be stuck. You can't really construct a functional game plan that is gonna lead into something that is performing a form of win with only Valki. And if Valki gets killed because you need him to go back to command so that you can recast it as the Tibalt, the more expensive version, you're gonna increase the command attacks. So instead of paying 7 mana, you're paying 9 mana. So casting Valki and then losing Valki will actually hurt you. My recommendation is that you basically construct an interactive stacks mid-range control Rakdos deck that is really good at interacting with your opponents and ramping with rituals, dark rituals and mana rocks as such, and get that planeswalker 7 mana into play as fast as you can around turn 3, turn 4 if it goes a little bit bad, but if it's turn 5 that's just too late. And then start grinding value with the +2 loyalty ability. I think it's gonna be quite easy to actually protect this against attackers. You're probably gonna have some stacks, creatures, black and red creatures in play that can protect it and block and such. And at 7 loyalty, it's gonna take a beating before it goes away. And during that time, during that beating, you're probably gonna put some blockers into play to protect it eventually. And drawing 4 cards per turn, that is really good. You are gonna be able to construct some form of game plan from that without a problem. I actually think you should have both Demonic Consultation and Tainted Pact inside your deck, just because you could exile one of your opponent's Thassa's Oracle, and this would increase the chance of you basically stealing that combo and winning with that thing from your opponents. Otherwise, I think the main combo for this deck is gonna be Underworld Breach, but this is where the Tibalt Planeswalker actually gets a little bit interesting. If you're able to get to the ultimate, exiling all of your opponent's graveyards and your graveyard as well, and gaining free mana, you're basically creating a Underworld Breach yourself, and from here, with your opponent's graveyards and such, you should be able to figure out something. And in the current metagame, people are heavily wheeling away their hands to fill their graveyards to draw more cards, so Breach synergy is definitely something I highly recommend for you if you're building this deck. Now what about having this Trickster inside the 99? Well, first off, Valki is the one that you have inside the 99. Tibalt is only an option if you have the card in your hand. So all creature tutors are gonna find Valki. Whatever is putting something directly into play is gonna put Valki directly into play. This immediately takes us to the legendary master girl Cizay Weatherlight Captain that can tutor out legendary things. Now she can't find Tibalt at the Planeswalker version because that is not an option she sees inside the deck. She only sees Valki. On the other hand, Cizay would have to be an 8/8 to be able to find and grab Tibalt out there on the Steamsy 7. But Steamsy only needs to be a 3/3 to grab Valki out of the deck. And finding Valki in instant speed isn't that bad either. Let's say you're in your last opponent's end step and you just want to grow Cizay a little bit so she can find bigger things in the future. But you also want to interact with your opponents and also want to gain a little bit of value at the same time on this activation. Well, finding Valki is gonna let you look at all of your opponent's hand and from here figuring out what they're up to so you can strategize on what you should do next, because Cizay is a meta deck that is trying to adapt towards your opponent, and looking at their hand is gonna help you a lot. Also, removing something, a mana dork, a hate barrier that you don't like, maybe you could remove that opposition agent, that would be great, or stealing a combo creature that they wanna use, preventing them from basically winning the game. But also, you could activate Valki later to become a copy of that thing, gaining some value yourself. I honestly think Valki could be CC's go-to creature to find when she is a free. To give you an example, I often want to find Kenan when CC is a free because Kenan is giving me a lot of value. I'm able to double up on all my mana production basically, except for the lands. However, Kenan isn't really interacting with any one of my opponents, so I might be accidentally losing to a combo that one of my opponents are going for. So I usually end up finding Kataki or Lavinia Azorius Renegade because those are actually interacting with my opponents in general, but I don't gain any value myself. Well, CC will grow in power and that is good, but I don't progress my board state, I don't increase my mana production, and I don't draw any cards. However, Valki will do a little bit of both, interacting with my opponents and gaining some value at the same time. Well, it's not super interactive and it's not a lot of value, but it is something of both. And if you end up drawing the card, just cast it for only 2 mana, make CC grow, you gain some information, you steal some cards from your opponents, and that's that. That is not a dead card in your hand. That is something you could use in the early game. However, if CC gets killed, which always happened to me in every single game, counterspelled, spot removal, get CC out of here, we don't want to play against her. That's my usual game in general. Then you could basically cast the 7 mana Tibalt from your hand instead as a secondary commander option. Now you're gonna say 7 mana is a lot, but in general 7 mana is nothing for a typical CC deck. CC decks are usually built in order to explode with mana. And then you just go value town. Other than CC, I guess this is something Grenzo Dungeon Warden could definitely play, easily finding Valki on a Grenzo activation, or if you draw the card and you have mana left over and Grenzo is for some reason killed, you could cast the big Tibalt Planeswalker. And as a finalized review, I think this is showcasing the cEDH viability of this card, because Valki is always going to be a decent card in the early game against opponents, interacting with your opponents, removing some cards, and gaining some information. It's never really a dead card in your hand for 2 mana. But if the game goes really long, you have that super late game grind station for 7 mana that is drawing 4 cards per turn. To really showcase what I mean to prove the potential of this card, I would like to showcase Cyclonic Rift, a staple in EDH. The big reason cEDH is able to play Cyclonic Rift is that you can cast it for only 2 mana in a desperate early game situation. You don't have 7 mana in the early game to cast this and interact with your opponents. You usually cast it for only 2 mana to interact with something. But in the super late game stage, when there's a bunch of stacks things in play and you just want to board wipe your opponents, 7 mana is a viable option. And this Tibalt card is on the same thing. You can cast it in the early game to do something really small, similar to a 2 mana called Cyclonic Rift, or 7 mana in the late game where you just want to take over the game. Honestly, Tibalt for 7 mana in a stacks out late cEDH game could be a win con. Draw 4 cards per turn, that is really scary, guys. Let me make another example. Here's Seedborn Muse Thrasius, definitely considerable as a win con. If you get this in play, you're drawing somewhat 4 to 8 cards a turn cycle, and that's taking over the game so fast. You're gonna win the game with this because you're gonna draw so much mana production, you're gonna draw so much counter spells and spot removals and tutors, so you're gonna be able to assemble your win con and protect your win con with counter spells and other things against free opponents without a problem. This is a win con, guaranteed. However, it's 5 mana for the Seedborn Muse and 2 more mana for the Thrasius. That's a total of 7, however you pay them separately, first Thrasius, then 5 for Seedborn, so in the end usually just 5. Seedborn Muse, however, is in my opinion considered a little bit expensive for really fast turbo meta games. It's really risky having Seedborn Muse in your hand if someone is trying to win early. But this is not a problem for Valki. You can easily cast Valki in the early game to interact a little bit with your opponents and understand what they're up to. Or if you draw Valki in the late game where the game is stacked out, just like you would cast Seedborn Muse, you cast the big Tibalt Planeswalker. So here is, you have something that's good in the early game that is also great in a late game. Basically the same as Seedborn Muse, but also functional early game. And because of all this, I think, in my personal opinion, that a 7 mana Tibalt is actually cEDH viable.
Toss a coin to your Twitcher.
Oh, please share the video. Oh, please share the video. Toss a coin to your Twitcher, a friend of communities. Thank you, Patreons. The champion will prevail. Now pour him some mail. Toss a coin to your Twitcher. Oh, please share the video. Oh, please share the video. Toss a coin to your Twitcher, a friend of community.